Reverse.
He wanted. He didn't want it after he saw it. And so then he had a pretty good buzz cut because there was no change in that.
So, Whitney or Jay, would you like to do a quick mic check?
Good evening. I probably won't be speaking tonight. Thank you, though.
Same, but can you all hear me?
We can. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hello, Jess. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Michael and my long day with MPO in the morning. Of course, I don't think this one will be 3.5 hours.
No, well, we can just make sure it's not. Let's just decide that right now.
I
Hello, Adam. Hello, Camille.
was voting for Jess's proposal.
I thought
That
you
was
were-
my I,
Okay. All right.
like A or I. Is that not how we vote?
Yes.
Did you already forget how we vote?
Yes. Yes. I, affirmative.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty please.
Hello, Amy.
Hello,
I feel like it's a
everyone.
winning proposition. Who's going to say no to that?
Oh, I would cry.
I don't know how many questions y'all ask. We'll see.
Was that a hint, Mayor?
No. It was a direct, let's see how efficient we can be.
We should create a system where we award some kinds of rewards or points to the presenters for being brief.
Don't you remember Flo used to give us bananas and we did a good job? Of course, she gave us
Yes.
bananas, we did a bad job. But she would say, these are because you did such a good job.
Uh-huh.
She really.
Yeah, they always have bananas at the meeting, so she didn't want anyone to have to drag home, 9, they would always have 9 bananas in case everybody wanted one at once, which we never did. So then she'd hand them out to go home with us. So what was
Yeah, at one time, she gave me a banana. I put it in my case and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, I stuck my hand in my case and it was not a pleasant surprise.
Oh,
Thanks for sharing, Michael.
A gift from Flo. It was with love.
It was absolutely.
I keep gummy bears in my briefcase and Jess didn't like knowing that. I can't get up during the meeting to go search for snacks, so I just have some there. But I don't think I've eaten them. I think the same ones are in there for the last 2 years. Maybe I should clean them out.
They are gross to begin with.
Well, they're entertaining.
no, gummy bears aren't gross. No,
They're
sorry.
very gross.
Gummy bears are delicious.
Thank
No.
you.
This will be the debate. This will be the get to know you event next week. Your feelings
Yeah,
on gummy
Why
bears.
would you waste like any time or calories on something so unsatisfying? Like,
What
why?
else?
I think actually the question should be, what is the worst candy that you secretly love to eat?
Oh, here we go.
It certainly isn't.
All of it.
Not gummy bears, I can tell you that
Really
much.
nice
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
Really?
It's
I tell
like
you what, I
pig
used to not
fat.
like to get at Halloween were those Necco
1 minute.
wafers,
Neckos? Oh, I like
the
Neckos.
Neckos.
No, too
Actually, I have a
good.
weakness for candy corn.
Oh, gross.
Oh.
You can have mine,
no.
Michael. Oh,
Gross.
Of course,
Gross.
Michael's that person.
I used to like the
Always
orange
one
circus
kid.
peanuts, the
I would take them
marshmallow.
Or the- oh, really, Amy?
in your teeth. Oh, they were so good.
What?
I don't know why they're disgusting, but
What was that, Amy? I didn't hear you.
the
30
circus
seconds.
peanuts, the orange
30
ones.
seconds.
Oh, I don't.
Orange
Oh, those.
marshmallow.
Ooh. You ever have
Oh,
corn nuts?
those are disgusting.
They
Are
are.
disgusting.
Agreed.
Really gross.
Agreed.
And I liked them a little stale.
Oh, even better.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, you need a
Amy.
little crunch there.
Nice.
Thank you. It's all
We're learning a lot about each other, but it's
I know.
about
10 seconds. 10
I'll mute.
seconds. 10 seconds.
Yeah,
10
get this
seconds.
under control.
Okay.
I don't.
all right. Reel in your candy cravings. Oh, you made me laugh too hard. My eyes are watering.
We're live.
Oh, good. We're live. Oh, right on the dot. We like that. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the March 9th Town of Chapel Hill business meeting. We're glad to have you with us, however you are here with us, or if you're watching us later, welcome. We know we have some people watching from the Zoom land, and I will just remind everyone that you may not be able to see all the panelists that are here all the time. It's properties of Zoom that move folks around. So there's more people than you're seeing on the screen. And so we just send that reminder out there. I also want to say that we have a change to our agenda this evening. We have taken off the 828 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard police station project and moved it to March 23rd so that it will come after the public information meeting on this topic, which will be on March 21st at 7 p.m. And I'm trying to think, did I get it? And I'm pretty sure that's virtual, but I'll get a confirmation on that. And so that leaves us with 3 items on the discussion agenda this evening. First up, we'll have an update from the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness. Then we'll have a public hearing related to closing a portion of public right-of-way along Lennox. And then we're going to have a concept plan for the proposed Weaver Dairy Road residential project. Concept plans are not voted on. We just give feedback. The public's welcome to weigh in and give their comments as well. So, and again, we like to hear from the public. You could have registered ahead of time, or you can still use the raise the hand function in Zoom, or *9 if you're on the phone. We will help transition you in. And then we ask everyone to stay within a 3-minute window of comments. And there are other ways to communicate with us as well. You're always welcome to send us an email or call, not during the meeting though, please. I had somebody call during the meeting when I said that. At other times, we appreciate that. Okay, we need to start off our virtual meeting. And just a reminder to council and the public, we are staying virtual at least through the end of March. We're working on which meeting we'll come back for in April, but we did decide that all of our CCES meetings on the first Fridays would be virtual from now on, just so our friendly reminder. So that would be the first meeting up in April on April 1st. So just letting everyone know, but we're working all that out and we'll get back to you. So when I call your name, if you will please unmute yourself and say aye or present or here, whatever works for you, that would be fabulous. Mayor Pro Tem Karen Stegman.
Here.
Councilmember Jess Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Camille Berry.
Here.
Councilmember Ty Wynn.
Present.
Councilmember Paris Miller-Fouché.
Here.
Councilmember Michael Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Amy Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Adam Searing.
Here.
And the mayor is also here. Thank you very much. Ooh, we have 2 proclamations tonight. First up is Creek Week, and we're going to have Councilmember Amy Ryan read that one for us, please. And these are abbreviated proclamations. The full one goes out on social media, but we don't read the full proclamations anymore, just a synopsis. So welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Hi, everyone. I'm proud to be announcing Creek Week 22. A defining environmental feature of Chapel Hill is our creeks and streams. They support outdoor recreation, healthy lifestyles, a biodiverse ecology, safe regional drinking water supplies, and more. To encourage our community to explore our local creeks and help clean them up, the town of Chapel Hill is joining with our neighbors in Orange County to proclaim and celebrate our first ever Creek Week. Creek Week will take place from March 12th through the 19th. During this time, we encourage everyone to join us for a week-long DIY cleanup challenge. This virtual challenge invites you to grab a bag and pick up trash near your creek or around your neighborhood or business to make sure it doesn't end up in our waterways. Our goal is to beat last year's Carrboro Chapel Hill joint cleanup trash total, weighing in at 1,555 pounds. There will also be a stormwater runoff virtual 5K, a community science biothon, and several other events through the week. Working together, we can all keep our waterways and our planet healthy. Please check out Orange County's Creek Week webpage and the town's social media for more information. And thanks, everyone. Go find your local creek this week.
Yeah, and so it's a great family fun activity to clean out a creek or with friends. And as we said, most of our creeks are along greenways. So Mayor Siles, Damon Siles, and I went out together. They did some filming. We'll post that later. We picked up about 4 pounds in about 5 minutes of picking up. And there's a lot of that stuff out there. Durham's been the only other city in our area that celebrated Creek Week, and they collected over 160,000 pounds of trash. And every bit of trash that we take out of our creeks doesn't go into our watershed. And so that helps make healthier drinking water for all. Anyway, Creek Week is next week, I believe. So get on your wet tennis shoes and go on out there and clean up some trash. All right. Next up, we have the Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. We have our proclamation to highlight developmental disabilities awareness, and we have Council Member Adam Searing doing this one. You're muted, so we can't hear you.
Okay, is that better? Yes, okay. So here in Chapel Hill, we know that folks with disabilities are our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, and our family. That's why we are declaring or acknowledging that this is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which traces back to 1945 and was created to educate about disability employment issues and to celebrate the many and varied contributions of America's workers with disabilities. As a town, we know that workplaces that welcome the talents of all people, including people with disabilities, are a critical part of our efforts to build an inclusive community and a strong economy. So we're declaring that this be National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and we call on our employers, schools, and other community organizations in Chapel Hill to focus on advancing the important message that people with disabilities add value and talent to our workplaces and communities. Additionally, we pledge to pursue the goals of opportunity, full participation, economic self-sufficiency, and independent living for people with disabilities through our own hiring practices.
Thank you. It's also Traumatic Brain Injury Awareness Month. Some of the same things to be said with making sure to build awareness around those folks as well. And there's currently over 200,000 people in North Carolina living with a traumatic brain injury related disability.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, I think that I may have been given the wrong announcement. It looks like that this was perhaps from October, and so I don't want to leave without doing that. So maybe we could redo that when we get through the later in the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for reading for us. Okay, I have a few announcements to make. It's this week, March 6th through 12th, is Severe Weather Preparedness Week to help people plan ahead for severe weather. We had some really big wind gusts this week. The town's been sharing messages on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Nextdoor. We also have helpful links on the emergency webpage of our town website. We hope folks that will take time to assess your own situation and take any necessary steps that you and your family are well prepared in case of severe weather. That means water and a power and a light supply, things like that, a safe place to go within your own home or somewhere else, and just making sure you know what those routes are. Advisory board applications are open, and we are looking for folks to fill many advisory boards and positions. We rotate about a third of all advisory board seats every 3 years. And as they come through, that makes that every year we are looking for more people to apply. Most boards require no experience, and we're hopeful that some people from the People's Academy will also apply, just hint, as they're out there. And so please take a moment to go to the town website, or we have printed forms available at Town Hall if you prefer to fill out one in a printed format. So we encourage folks to apply. Next week, the council will be participating in the second part of our annual retreat that was postponed. We're going to be meeting Wednesday, March 16th at 4 p.m. back at the Rizzo Center. and we'll be focusing on our strategic goals as we prepare for budget season. So our next regular council meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 23rd, virtual, as we've been doing. Are there other announcements from council members? Okay, well, that brings us up to public comment and petitions on items not on the printed agenda. We did have 2 petitions come in, so we will ask for those up first, but if someone's wanting to speak to something not on the printed agenda, if you'll use the raise your hand function or the *9, we will call you in. People aren't always here for their petitions when they submit them by writing, so we'll just find out. But we have Wayne Pine's request to reconstruct Estes Drive with alternate bike facilities, and Steve Moore's request for protection of Old Chapel Hill Cemetery. Are they here? You're not seeing them, Karen?
They don't appear to be here, no.
Okay, so we do have these 2 petitions, folks. What would you like to do?
Move, we receive and refer.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Anderson and second by Mr. Nguyen that we receive and refer these petitions that go to the manager and mayor for review and get logged into our petition list and then looked at to see where they fall in response ways. So we'll need a roll call vote, of course. So we will start with Mayor Pro Tem Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Paris Miller. I'm going to get a tongue tie there. Ms. Miller-Fouché.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you. All right. Are there other members of the public or other petitions that anyone wants to share with us this evening? I didn't check the chat box. Let's see what's going on.
Nope. Nothing.
All right. Well, that will bring us to our consent agenda, please. We have an amended consent agenda. There are several items on the consent agenda, so I bring that forward to council.
I'll move the amended consent agenda.
Second.
So moved by Ms. Anderson,
Ed.
second by Mr. Nguyen, for the amended consent agenda. Any discussion? All right, roll call vote then. Ms. Stegman,
Aye.
Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
Ms. Berry,
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen,
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fouché,
Aye.
Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Searing,
Aye.
and the mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. All right, that brings us up to our first discussion item, which will be getting an update from the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness. And we have Rachel Waltz, and looks like Sarah Vigna's piped in here, and I'm not sure who else, so welcome and help get us started.
Well, I will introduce Rachel Waltz. Rachel Waltz is the manager of the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness, and she has been with the team in her permanent role capacity relatively recently, and we're thrilled to have her in this role. And she'll be providing you all with an update this evening on the partnership's work and progress to date, as well as their efforts to fill the homelessness systems gaps. So I'll turn it over to you, Rachel.
Yay, Rachel. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Sarah and Jess. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all this evening about the state of the homeless service system in Orange County. And I will proceed with sharing my screen. Oops. Alrighty. Again, I really appreciate the chance to speak with you more in depth about the homeless service system in Orange County, share some successes, some challenges that were pre-existing, as well as those that have been exacerbated by COVID-19, and then also talk through a path forward, as well as answer any questions you all may have. So first, a little bit of a lay of the land. The Orange County Homeless Service System grew quite a bit. Looking at data from the fiscal year 2021 system performance measures, So some of you may have seen our data review event that takes both our point in time count, which happens the last Wednesday of January, that gives us kind of a snapshot. HUD really utilizes system performance measures to see how our system is doing as a whole. And so this captures all data from homeless service providers from October of 2020 through September of 2021. And so we saw a pretty significant increase in people served in shelter and transitional housing, rapid increase in the number of people served through rapid rehousing, modest reduction in number of folks served through permanent supportive housing. And then really what was new for really the year of 2021 was the introduction of street outreach, which I know that Chapel Hill Town Council has really been a big champion of. And so the street outreach team served 220 people, unduplicated people from October 2020, sorry for the typo, October 2020 through December 2021. So what has enabled some of that expansion has been an increase in federal funding. And so we anticipate receiving $941,362 in federal funding for 2021 through the Continuum of Care funds, as well as the Emergency Solutions Grant, which is a block grant that's administered by the State Department of Health and Human Services. And so that has brought $12.9 million to the homeless service providers in our community since 2005. So you see here a fairly significant increase for 2020. And the state has actually allowed us to continue expending some of the ESG COVID funds through September 30th, which is great. It continues to provide support for things like rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention in Orange County. So with the provision of all of those services, we have been able to house more vulnerable households than ever before. In the calendar year 2021, we served 145 vulnerable households. Those were households that were currently experiencing homelessness in 2021 that we were able to find housing for through the by name list, which in our community is called the Home Committee. So that's a kind of national best practice where service providers across the spectrum get together twice a month to literally go through the list of people experiencing homelessness in our community to allow for case conferencing, developing individualized housing plans. And so as a result of that, that good work that started, again, Chapel Hill and Orange County were really early adopters of that practice. We've housed 442 people since 2012. So that's the good news story. The bad news story really is that our numbers of people experiencing homelessness in our community continue to increase and increase pretty significantly. So the point in time count that took place January 2021 indicated that there were 176 people experiencing homelessness on a cold night last year. And so again, we had been making some progress, and we'll talk about that on the next slide, but just really want to highlight for folks that, COVID contributed to many disruptions in the way folks typically access services. When public buildings were closed and there were disruptions with employment and childcare and schools and all of those things, it was much harder for folks to access services. At the same time, it also allowed for a number of funding opportunities. So with the provision of the Emergency Solutions COVID grant, we were able to fill a long-standing gap in our homeless service system with the advent of the Street Outreach Harm Reduction and Deflection team. That really allowed us to build trusting relationships with many folks who maybe have not felt like they've been kind of adequately served by the system in the past. Folks who are more likely to have significant experiences of trauma, dealing with a variety of mental health, physical health issues. And so with the addition of the Street Outreach team, we really got a chance to, we kind of didn't know what we didn't know before. And so we feel like with those numbers starting in 2021, we really have a better sense of who's experiencing homelessness in our community. At the same time, we see that subpopulations are having different outcomes. And so again, after a number of years of having steady decreases in homelessness for families and veterans and chronic homelessness, our progress serving veterans has really flatlined. A number of other communities have completely ended veteran homelessness. There have been significant investments through the Department of Veterans Affairs and others. And we've persistently had about 10 veterans experiencing homelessness on a given night. At the same time, we know that families experiencing homelessness have continued to decline, but some of that progress is starting to flatline. And we've heard anecdotally from service providers that people are staying in unsafe situations longer due to all of the disruptions that COVID has brought about. And then at the same time, we've really seen a significant explosion in people experiencing chronic homelessness. This increase into 2021 really indicated that we've erased all the gains that we've made in the last decade when it comes to combating chronic homelessness in our community. So this data kind of speaks to that snapshot, that point in time count on a given night. Moving to how are we doing in our system as a whole, HUD uses 7 system performance measures to help us kind of mark progress towards our goal of ensuring that homelessness is rare, brief, and one time. And so the system performance measures actually just became available for our system last week. So that would capture data from October of 2020 through September 2021. So we'll certainly hear more from me. We'll be doing another data review event probably early summer once we get our point in time count numbers kind of clarified and submitted to HUD. But thinking first about ensuring that homelessness is rare, we've seen that the number of people getting served by emergency shelter and transitional housing in our community have gone up from 321 with last fiscal year up to 358, so about a 10% increase. We've also seen the length of time homelessness. So thinking about, rare, meaning the number of people that are being kind of captured or served in the system, that it's brief. We've seen the length of time of people experiencing homelessness is continuing to rise. At this point, the median length of time homeless for someone is 384 days, which is an increase of also about 10%. Last year's median length of time homeless was 354 days. So it went from 354 to 384. And then also looking at the returns to homelessness. Homelessness can be really just have so many cascading negative effects, including destroying someone's credit, much harder to keep a job, harder at times to keep families intact. And so we want to make sure that when someone is able to find permanent housing, that they don't return to homelessness. And in our community, returns to homelessness rose slightly from 9% to 11%. They're still under the HUD benchmark of 15%, but any increase is alarming because our community works really, really hard to ensure that folks who are experiencing homelessness get into permanent and safe housing as quickly as possible. Another, I think, marker that may be of interest to y'all is the percentage of folks who are experiencing homelessness for the first time in our community. And so that rose a bit. In fiscal year 2020, it was 22% of people getting served were experiencing homelessness for the first time. In fiscal year 2021, 25% of people served in our system were experiencing homelessness for the first time. So when we talk again about ending homelessness, we don't mean that no one ever experiences a housing crisis ever again. We know that things happen. What we really want to be focusing on again is making sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and one time, so that we can really start to focus our efforts on this left-hand side, this orange column, so that we can really mostly be focusing on that prevention side. But as long as people are experiencing homelessness, either sheltered or unsheltered, they remain much more vulnerable to early death. Actually coming off of the heels of a vigil for lives lost from earlier this evening. So yeah, happy to talk about the wide variety of prevention efforts that are administered through the Partnership to End Homelessness, as well as Orange County Housing and Community Development. A little bit of context. We've administered about $9 million between EHA, which is Emergency Housing Assistance, and HOPE funds to help people maintain their housing. Also, the Housing Helpline, which provides coordinated entry in our community for people experiencing housing crisis, continue to assist between 500 and 600 unduplicated households each month. 90% of that work is really focused on the prevention side. So linking people to EHA, assisting folks with information about fair housing and eviction prevention, as well as providing people information about affordable housing. So again, there's a lot of prevention work that's happening. Based on evidence and best data, we do really preserve some of the most kind of intensive supports for people who are most vulnerable and are currently experiencing homelessness. So we have made some progress in filling gaps in our system in recent years. The town of Chapel Hill generously helped expand the street outreach, harm reduction, and deflection team's capacity by helping fund a 4th position, which will allow us to further serve people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, continue to work with small business owners and institutional partners like UNC, as well as provide deflection from the criminal justice system using innovations like Outreach Court. And so we know what works, and what works is filling the gaps. We also know that it's less expensive to fill gaps than to have the continued number of people experiencing homelessness in our community that we do. So I appreciate folks' time this evening, and yeah, happy to answer some questions. Also able to be reached here for any further follow-up. I'll stop for now.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. And you can, yeah, there we go. Council, other clarifying questions before we ask for comments from the public? I saw Ms. Stegman, followed by Mr. Sear.
Thanks, Rachel. That was a great presentation, really helpful. I have a couple of questions. First, if you could talk about, obviously you've shared that you've served more people this year and also got more funding this year. So is the ability to, has the need always been there and you just didn't have the money to serve folks, or is the need, I assume, is also greater because of COVID, or is it both? What's kind of the balance there?
Yeah, that's a good question, Karen. I think certainly with people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, the need has always been there. We just didn't know what we didn't know before. Orange County, in a way that's different than a lot of other communities, did not have a dedicated street outreach team for many years. That was a fairly new innovation in our community. It started in October of 2020. At the same time, you know, so there's the annual homelessness assessment report that goes to Congress, and the sheltered portion from the point in time count last year was just released, I think, about 2 weeks ago. And across the nation, we broadly saw some modest declines in the shelter population, declines of about 10%. And at the same time, we had increases in our shelter population. So I think there is a bit of a both and. Certainly the funding opportunities allowed us to serve more people and serve more people in a richer and more comprehensive way. But we also saw that increased demand for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. And so what are your thoughts as COVID funding, kind of specific funding that's enabled you to do so much more, as that funding starts to taper off? What are your thoughts on how we can continue to try to meet the need where we know, as you said, we have gaps and we're not meeting the need, but at least maintain the level of service that you have now reached?
Sure. Yeah, great question. You know, I will say that that HUD and our partners at North Carolina's Department of Health and Human Services have really emphasized that contingency planning for a long time. We've received some messaging from HUD that they're willing to extend kind of the provision of when funds can be expended by, which has allowed us to extend some of those service offerings as well. At the same time, I've certainly been heartened to see some prevention supports come in-house to Orange County Housing and Community Development, like the eviction prevention attorney, some other supports to link folks. I think the continued success of the EHA program. I also think that it is a time to be wise about the investments that we're making, right? So HUD has a 25% match for grant funds, and that has given some of our partners in the community pause when it comes to applying for funds. So the Interfaith Council is kind of the sole provider of a best practice permanent supportive housing program in our community. And permanent supportive housing is an incredibly effective tool. It's also not cheap. And so for an organization of IFC's size, securing a 25% match has, I think, given them pause when it comes to looking to expand the program. At the same time, we've also been looking to explore some other options when it comes to funding. We actually just received notice today that our grant with the Foundation for Health Leadership and Innovation was approved. So that'll bring another $100,000 in, found about today, to help incorporate NC Care 360 into our coordinated entry process. So we're always out there hunting.
Congratulations on that grant. That's great. And I do hope that, I mean, if that 25% match is the barrier, it seems like local government could come together between all of us to support. That should not be the barrier if we could get significant new funding into the community. So I hope we'll have that conversation. Another question, and I don't know if you can answer this or not. I know you're not IFC, but IFC is, you know, part of the partnership. Several years ago, IFC kind of began a conversation around shifting the community house to more of a housing first model. And then that kind of stopped. Are there plans to continue that? Do you know? Or, I mean, again, I know you can't speak for them, but.
I don't know the state of the plans now. I know that from the standpoint of what we know works, a best practice housing first focused emergency shelter that is accessible would really be a game changer in our community. We saw the number of exits to permanent housing decrease, the number of exits overall decrease from emergency shelter and transitional housing last year. I'm sure some of that is COVID related. And I think in our community, we've seen what happens when people are not able to access same-day shelter.
Yeah, I'd love to see that move forward again. Final question. The Emergency Housing Assistance Program, is that going to continue, or has that been primarily funded by COVID funding?
That I do not know. That the Emergency Housing Assistance Program rests within the Community Development Department, within Housing and Community Development. And so I'll attempt not to speak out of turn, but my understanding was that previously kind of all the municipalities, this was a kind of an effort to pull funds together from the 4 municipalities, made for an easier administration of funds to get things out to folks to, again, avoid kind of going down the route of housing crisis. But I'm certainly happy to check in and bring some information back to y'all.
And Councilmember Segment, I can speak to that. The county has funding in place for this fiscal year through ARPA, as well as CDBG funding that was received by both Hillsborough and Carborough. And we're also looking at potential for ARPA or other affordable housing sources to continue to support the program beyond this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's it. Thanks so much.
Mr. Searing, followed by Ms. Miller-Fouché, and then Mr. Parker.
Yeah, thanks. I just have one question. So and a lot of council members segment covered a lot of what I was interested in, but my additional question was, you know, that the almost $1 million from the federal government was a huge infusion, and and we obviously needed it. But I was really struck by your comment about we don't know what we didn't know, and I just wonder, as we move forward, there are a lot of areas like this, like, the child tax credit or free lunches in the schools and stuff. How can we help you make the case for more funding to both, not just here, but to our state and federal governments too? Because, obviously putting $1 million in just really was transformative in many ways. So are there ways, like, can we have a list of the, I know from your presentation, we have some of that detail and from what you're saying, but there might be ways that we can make that case, because it did seem like it was, from what you're saying, it allowed us to do a lot that we couldn't do before. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's, a common refrain I hear from service providers again and again is when we look to HUD for kind of continuity funding, it really constrains kind of who we can serve and how we can serve folks. Again, Orange County was really early adopter of a number of best practices. And we've seen the fruits of that. We housed 145 households last year and had housed 87 the previous year. From the standpoint of kind of who to talk to and how to talk to them to continue to invest in these types of efforts, so that, again, we can kind of reach that goal of social justice and full civic participation. And that's what we're really talking about here. Yeah, I'm happy to, again, provide information, explore additional resources. I can look into that further, because, again, I think when we think sometimes of like homelessness as this thing that's happening over here and don't see it within the larger context of housing affordability and access to care, it I think limits our effectiveness.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, Ms. Miller-Fouché, followed by Mr. Parker.
Yeah, I'm going to be really quick because Councilmember Stegman answered all the questions that I had as well as it pertained to funding and those federal funds going away and what gaps were going to be there. And so my next question is, would love an update on the 4th position for SORAD. Has that position been filled, and are they out in the field?
Yeah, great question. We're that position posted last week. And so it closes next week, and then we'll be expediently interviewing. And yeah, it's been posted and circulated. I shared it with UNC. So UNC is the kind of administering body for certified peer support specialists in the state of North Carolina. So we're trying to spread the message far and wide.
Great, thank you for that update. And lastly, just would really love to hear a little bit more about that housing first model, since it's going to be a game changer. And if it's going to be a game changer, would love to see some real active, would love to see you come back and say we're moving in that direction, and working with community partners for that. Could you just real briefly, the housing first model, why is it a game changer?
Yeah, great question. So there's really been a transformation in homeless services across the country in the last 10 to 15 years that was really led by centering people with lived experience. That when folks are closest to these issues, they come up with the best solutions, much better than solutions that I can't tell someone what they need. I need someone to tell me what they need and what's important to them. And so Housing First is a really effective model of saying, yes, people may present with all kinds of things going on in their lives when it comes to health or mental health and family and all the things. But if I wait until someone has addressed all of those things successfully before putting them into housing, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of fall out of that system. And so let's get folks housed as quickly as possible, and then provide folks with the supports that they say they need in order to successfully maintain that housing.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Mr. Parker?
Thanks.
And then Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, you ended your presentation with a very provocative slide, basically saying, we know how to end homelessness and this is what it would cost, and it would save us $800,000 a year. So that seems to me like That's a no-brainer. So how do we get there, right? I mean, if you said it's costing us $3.5 million a year now to do things the way we're doing them. It would cost us $2.7 million a year not to do things the way we're doing things and actually solve the problem. So what's the roadmap to solving the problem? How do we actually end homelessness?
Yeah, great question. So, I mentioned kind of the sea change when it comes to homeless services over the last 10 years. We've really moved away from thinking about programs in these really discrete ways into thinking using much more of a systems approach. And so, right now I mentioned, the length of time that folks experience homelessness in emergency shelter or transitional housing. And so when there's bottlenecks in one part of the system, that need has to go somewhere. And so it makes for less efficient systems overall. And so by fully kind of filling the gap for things like permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, we can provide people who are most vulnerable, people who are experiencing chronic homelessness, folks who are living on the streets, folks who have multiple disabilities. They will get the supports that they need. So it's both a housing and, right? That's great to be able to get your own keys, get your own space. Many folks need individualized types of supports in order to maintain that and be successful over time. And so when we open up availability for things like permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, we're able to move folks out of shelter more quickly, which then increases shelter's capacity to serve folks closer to that housing crisis, which then allows us to focus more on some of the prevention efforts so that folks either don't experience a housing crisis to begin with, or we can kind of divert them from even entering the system if they do need kind of a little bit of support to maintain where they are. And so that's really where it starts. It starts with filling those gaps to clean up some of the inefficiency in the system that's caused by having a system that's right now overburdened.
Yeah, that's not really my question. Mike, I understand that that's what we need to do. My question is, why aren't we doing it? And what do we as governments need to do to get to that place? Because we know what to do. You've been very articulate, and I really appreciate that in outlining what we need to do to end homelessness. We know how to do it. You've told us what it costs. What does it take to get us to do it?
Isn't that a question for us?
Well, maybe, I don't know. I certainly don't know the answer. So I'm hoping if it's not a Rachel question, but it seems like we've been told what to do. We've been told how to do it. We've been told what it costs, and we've been told it'll save us money. So why aren't we doing it?
Yeah, that's not a question for Rachel. That's
okay.
A question for us.
It's also a question for our partners like UNC Health and others who would save a lot of money by not providing services that then, don't allow people to live with dignity, right? So I think it's us and other partners and other pieces of the community where there's money being spent that you could actually save money and put it towards the front end and let people be housed. But I think that's part of the interest and part of the conversations that are happening around trying to engage with our partners and trying to figure out how can we make it sustainable and how can we make it, a community-wide effort, because it's not just us.
Yes, is UNC Health ever part of the partnership to end homelessness?
Well, actually, I think it's really exciting. And I'm sorry, Rachel, I'm not trying
to
steal your thunder, but I think that that the staff has done a really amazing job of recruiting for people with lived experience, as well as there's someone now from UNC Health there. We've always had people from the county and from the municipalities, but I think there's a much more representative group, and that we actually finally do have someone from UNC Health. And so I think that's the start of being able to actually have those conversations. And we talked about quantifying what does it look like for each kind of entity, generally not down to the penny, but how do we help our partners in the community understand that this is actually really expensive and it's leading to bad outcomes for humans. So it's a win-win to put that money on the front end.
Thank you. All right, we have a couple more council. We have Ms. Ryan, followed by Ms. Berry.
Yeah, could you real briefly, at one point you talked about once you had the street outreach that you had learned a bunch of new things that you didn't know. Could you just share some of that with us?
Sure. I think when people think of someone experiencing unsheltered homelessness in their minds, that may kind of draw our attention to people who may be in kind of the more densely populated areas, people who may be staying in and around Franklin Street. And so by having a well-supported street outreach team, it's actually kind of going out into the woods, responding, reaching out to businesses. We actually had a meeting with the UNC facilities crew a couple of days ago because they're building some astronomy, something I don't understand, but it's brought some renewed attention to some areas that have a lot of overgrowth and had been a bit neglected when it came to kind of grounds. And so, yeah, the street outreach team has really allowed us to start to build rapport with people who have literally been camping for years under our noses, and we just didn't know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Berry?
I'm going to wait until I don't have any more clarifying questions. The ones that I had have been answered. I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Don't think we had anybody pre-registered, but do we have anybody out there? All right.
There was a question in the chat. I don't know if we're.
It was directed to
questions in the chat.
Sarah Vinyas, so I'll let her take a look at that and maybe respond via email if she seems appropriate. Sarah, if you'll look at that question, thank you. All right, I bring it back to council comments, please. Ms. Berry, did you want to start off with a comment?
Thank you. I'm trying to hit the raise hand. Rachel, thank you very much for your leadership on this and for sharing this information. It hits very close to home for me, and having had to move in with friends with my children because I was facing this. And I appreciate Councilmember Parker's question about what do we do? And what I believe you're asking us is to prioritize here. And that is something that I will look to do along with the rest of the council members. I do appreciate the advocacy for an additional person to help you with SORAD. And I also will be paying attention along with everyone else as the relief funding dries up and we have individuals who have been getting assistance for rental or they've been protected moving out of that from under that protection. So I am very concerned and imagine you are too. So I will be, along with everyone else, paying attention and looking to see how we can help.
Okay. Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, for all you're doing. And I just wanted to also kind of brag on Rachel's behalf, since she's not doing it, that she's also reaching out to really try and get stronger connections with our schools, since that's kind of, I think, one of those places that we may not know what we don't know, and really trying to dig in deeper there. But I think there's just a lot of kind of really, really good work going on. I think that there's a lot better representation and some kind of more diverse voices at the table. And I just think we're headed in a really good direction. And I think too, just thinking through kind of strategically how we can engage our partners and also think about a long-term funding plan from all the municipalities where we can, really prioritize and think about how we sustainably kind of increase funding over time, I think is a really important piece of this. But I think there's just, as usual, there's really good work going on. So thank you, Rachel, for you and your team.
Any other council members? I'll just say the same. I'll just ditto. It's been fabulous to see the work that's been going on, the continued care, the wanting to look at things differently, wanting to help more people, realizing that they're not all the same, that there's different ways of helping people and there's better practices than what we have. So we can take a look at some of those things as you bring those forward to us about things we should re-examine and communicate and conversations we should be having. And UNC Healthcare would be a huge one because they admit a lot of people to the emergency room that maybe don't need to have gone that far. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So we appreciate that. And we encourage you to reach back out to us when needed. And I know Ms. Anderson keeps tabs on things as our liaison to the partnership. So I appreciate all that. Thank you.
Appreciate all that. Thank you so much.
All right. That brings us to our next item, open and close a public hearing to consider closing a portion of the public right-of-way on Maxwell Road and Hamilton Road within Glen Lennox development.
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me and see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you for letting me come speak to you this evening. My name is Chris Roberts and I'm your manager of engineering infrastructure in the Public Works Department. Tonight, I'm going to present to you a request to close portions of the public right-of-way of Maxwell and Hamilton roads within the Glen Lennox development that supports a realignment of both roads. There are 8 slides. This will approximately take no more than 5 minutes. So our recommendation is that council open and close the public hearing for this requested public right-of-way closure and consider adoption of a resolution to permanently close this public right-of-way. So what is the process for closing a public right-of-way? NC General Statute 168-299 was created to give local governments a framework to process a public right-of-way closure request such as this. It's a long piece of legislation, but the main points are that you hold a public hearing and adoption of a resolution to close the public right-of-way. There's a public communications requirement. Recommended subdivision of closed right-of-way land to fronting adjacent property owners and requires all fronting adjacent property owners who will be receiving land to pay for the survey recordation of plats. And it lays out a appeals process. So just to give you an idea of where this is at, of course, Glen Lennox is there next to 15501 and 54. And as you can see in this red clouded area, this is the area where we're talking about. So as you can see, this right-of-way closure process began with a request to call for public hearing on February 9th, 2022. Tonight, staff are recommending to open and close the public hearing, and if council so chooses to take action on the request. Your decision should be on the question of whether the closing would be detrimental to the public interest or the property rights of any individual. This is per NCGS 168-299. Today, we have not heard from anyone opposing this request. So just to give you a closer look into this, as you can see, there's Maxwell Road, there's Hamilton Road, and the red shaded area is the current right-of-way, as you can see here, the hashed area in red. And then the blue areas are the proposed new public right-of-way, which shows a realignment. It's basically going from a Y to more of a 90% or a 90-degree angled intersection. So what are the key issues here? That the closure is for realignment of Maxwell and Hamilton Road. This realignment is per the development agreement with the town, and there are no other adjacent fronting property owners in this area. So again, the recommendation is that council open and close the public hearing for the requested public right-of-way and consider adoption of a resolution to permanently close this public right-of-way. Thank you, and at this time, I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Great, thank you. Council, any clarifying questions on this item? Okay, anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Nope.
Okay, bring it back for any council comments. Any council action?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
The move by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Stegman. Sorry, that's who I heard first. Here we go. We'll need a roll call vote for that, please. Ms. Stegman,
Aye.
Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
Ms. Berry,
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen,
Aye.
Ms. Miller Fushi,
Aye.
Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Searing,
Aye.
and the mayor says aye as well.
I move R6.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Berry. Any discussion on R6? Okay, roll call vote then, please. Ms. Stegman,
Aye.
Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
Ms. Berry,
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen,
Aye.
Ms. Miller Fushi,
Aye.
Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Searing,
Aye.
and the mayor says aye as well. Is that all we need to do?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That one was quick. A friendly reminder that item number 15, the memorandum of understanding for the 828 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard has been moved to March 23rd. So that brings us to a concept plan for review at the Weaver Dairy Road residential area. And we have Judy Johnson. Hello, welcome to help start this item. And I would like the council to let Judy speak, and then we'll go ahead and let the developer do their presentation. Then we can ask clarifying questions. Thank you.
Alrighty, good evening. I'm Judy Johnson from our planning department, and here before you with the concept plan for this evening. I have a very brief presentation. I mean, you've seen several of these, so a lot of the slides are the same, and I'm just going to go quickly through those. Happy to answer any questions along the way if there are any. So the application before you tonight is for a piece of property. It's a large piece of property that spans from about Carroll Woods to the back of the Chapel Hill North shopping center and apartment complex. The proposal is to take basically the eastern portion of that eastern half of that property that comes in. Weaver Dairy Road is running along here, enters Weaver Dairy Road just to the west of the Coventry townhome community, bordering Carroll Woods, and you can see I-40 there along the north. Martin Luther King is over here to the west. So that's just a quick little locator map for you. So the recommendation is to transmit comments to the applicant following this evening's conversation. And as we have been sharing these slides with you through all the concept plans, just to remind you that there is no decision, only feedback tonight. And we're looking for the applicant to provide a rough sketch, and staff is not conducting a formal review. It has been reviewed by a couple of our advisory boards, including the Stormwater Management Utility Advisory Board, the Housing Advisory Board, which was last night, and the Community Design Commission. Following this concept plan, there's basically three choices, with the conditional zoning probably being the most prevalent choice coming forward. Just a quick summary of the project. Right now, it's currently zoned residential 3. They're proposing approximately 360 multifamily type units with a mix of apartments and townhomes. It's about half of that 40-acre site, and they are proposing some green and open space. I'm not going to go into discussion on the site plan. The applicant is here and will be walking you through that. So just wanted to kind of refresh or share with you the comments from our advisory board. So this did go to the Community Design Commission, and some of the conversation there did center around reducing the amount of impervious, reducing the building footprint size, looking for more open space and connectivity to the adjoining properties. As I said, it did go to our Housing Advisory Board last evening, so that did go out to you late this afternoon, their comments. From what I understand, there was applaud from the Housing Advisory Board for the applicant's efforts to meet the 15% affordable, and also the applicant was encouraged to consider housing vouchers. The Stormwater Management Utility Advisory Board also reviewed this application and was looking for additional information about the underground stormwater facilities, looking at designing for the 100-year storm and incorporating cisterns and low LID reuse of water type of things in the design of the building, preservation of the wetlands and looking for no disturbance of the RCD or the Jordan buffer. And also asking the refuse to be sited away from the Resource Conservation District. And similar to the Community Design Commission, was looking for a reduction in parking and increase in permeable pavement and reducing the impervious surfaces. We also have had, the town's urban designer has been working with the development team. This is just one of his little markup sketches that he has shared with them. And it's not for you to read and focus on, but just some of the highlights that the urban designer had shared with him is certainly the concept of the town's efforts for the Chapel Hill North concept, and considering the amount of surface parking and looking for multi-use trails through the property, as well as additional trails in the Resource Conservation District and the utility line that runs through a portion of this property. As we are highlighting to you the location of this property in our future land use map, you can see the star there on the property, or on the map where the property is. It is in our North Martin Luther King Boulevard focus area, and you can see it's in focus area D, which as a primary or predominant land uses does include multifamily shops and offices, multifamily residential, commercial and offices, and parks and green and gathering spaces. So those are shown in this column over here on the map, and this is from the adopted future land use map. And that concludes my presentation. And at this point, I would turn it over to the applicant to provide additional information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. This is David Helfrich. I am the President of Development for Aspen Heights. Wanted to thank everyone tonight for meeting with us to hear our presentation. We have a quick group of slides here to go through with you, and then we'll have our consultants and team answer any questions you may have about the project and the community. I don't know who is controlling the slides for us.
Sorry, that's
Jesse.
me, David. Yep, there you go. Sorry, is everyone seeing my screen all right?
Yeah, thank you, Jesse.
Okay,
just a brief overview about Aspen Heights. We are a developer headquartered in Austin, Texas. We have an office based here in Charlotte, which myself, I am residing, as well as the development team here. We were founded in 2006. We are vertically integrated, which means we are a developer, builder, and owner and property manager. So typically, we will play parts in all facets of the design, the construction, the development, as well as the management oversight of the asset long-term. We are a long-term owner. We do have institutional partners that invest with us and continue to do a good book of business with them. We've done about 1.6 million in total development across 34 projects nationwide since our inception. We have a very robust pipeline, $2 billion in total development. In addition to this project, we have another project in Chapel Hill on MLK Corridor, which is student housing, which you may have heard of previously. We have 375 employees across the nation. We have an extensive positive track record in all the communities we work in, and our capability to execute on all project types. We do cottage, garden, mid-rise, and high-rise products. We really pride ourselves in working with communities and really focusing on our design and development to ensure that we're good long-term partners and stewards of the projects that we're building. I think we'll turn it over next to the design team, our engineer, to talk a little bit about the community and the site development.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having us tonight to present our concept plan. I'm Jessie Hardesty. I'm a planner with McAdams, and I'm also here with Derek Blankenship, who is the civil project manager. Also from McAdams. And then we have Michael Leopold and Ofer Gelman on from Dwell Design Studio, who is the architect on the project. So just to orient everyone on the site, hold on a second, there we go. The project is located in the northern area of Chapel Hill, just south of 40 and north of Weaver Dairy Road. The project area is about 23 acres. The overall parcel is much larger and extends west of the site, of our site, but we're just focused on the eastern half. You may have seen the low water concept plan come through previously, and that occupies the other half of this parcel. As Judy mentioned, the site's currently zoned R3 and will likely be seeking an R6 conditional zoning district. And again, as she mentioned, it's in the North MLK Boulevard focus area that calls for multifamily as a primary use and townhomes as a secondary use, which this proposal would fulfill. So now on the screen, you'll see our current concept plan. We're proposing a total of 337 for rent units. A majority of these are apartments, and then we have alley-loaded townhomes serving as a transition to Weaver Dairy Road to the south, and then also serving as a transition to the development to the west. You'll notice on the right-hand side or the eastern side of the project, there's a lot of green space. There are streams located on this eastern portion of the site that will have an RCD buffer, and that's to be left undisturbed. And we've also shown a conceptual greenway weaving through the northern buffer per the mobility and connectivity plan that Chapel has. But as for more details of the design and some of the design decisions that were made, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dwell to talk through that a little bit more.
Yep, thanks, Jesse. Hi, my name is Michael Leopold with Dwell Design Studio, architectural firm working with the project team here. And I think everybody's done a great job explaining the site to us so far. And really just to kind of expand on a little bit further, the site itself has a lot of challenges. We've got a lot of topography on site. It falls probably about 50 feet. We've got a lot of the wetlands and the streams, as well as several electrical buffers that we've got to stay out of. So we were trying to be very thoughtful in how we kind of placed the building and where we could fit things in with the land we did have left over. So when we came in off Weaver Dairy Road, we wanted to start with a little bit lower density, and we started with townhomes there. Those are all rear loaded, so you've got garages in the back of those, and then they have stoops out the front. So it's a little bit more of a nice walkable community feel from that perspective as you come into the property. As you come back further back into the property, we go a little bit denser, and we have some 4-story product with some basement conditions there as well. Again, as everyone was saying, we've got 337 units, and within that we've got a wrap building in the back that has the pool courtyard in the middle. It's going to have multiple amenities for the community itself, and a lot of trails. So we wanted to try to get a lot of walking trails. We did have a connection trail shown to the north of the property along I-40. We've also got sidewalks connecting to the adjacent properties and out to Weaver Dairy. We've also started looking at providing additional green space and park areas to connect all the sidewalks and green spaces. The other thing that we were trying to do is keep the scale to the left and to the south of the project more at that 2-story with the townhomes to kind of integrate a little bit more with the communities that are happening around us rather than having that higher density out at those locations. Just if we want to start going to some of the elevation slides. So this is kind of coming into the property off of Weaver Dairy. These are the 2-story townhomes that I spoke of. We're still, again, we're still in concept planning. So some of this is still going to get modified. We're still working on some of the grading conditions and some of the green space areas, but the original grading we had some taller stoops here, and we're still working through that. But the idea is to have a little bit more of a contemporary farmhouse type look when it comes to the look at the townhomes. We're working to get the colors and just the final concepts put together, but feel this is a really strong start. You can see in the background, As we go further into the site, it gets denser, and that's where the 4-story building starts. Just want to go to the next slide. Again, this just shows more of a straight-on view of the townhomes and the stoops. And again, we're working to kind of work the grading to not have as many steps up to the locations. This is just further back into the site, and you can start to see how we also worked with the grading of the site. What we tried to do is actually tier step the building up the site to work with the grade. So we do have multiple building steps as well as multiple basement conditions to kind of work into the grade of the site. We were trying to do that for a lot of reasons, but just so that we weren't so far out of the ground. So this kind of gives you a main elevation look of how we, propose the building elevations to look. We have on the left side of this is what would be our lease and amenity space. And I think one of the next slides shows more of a courtyard kind of motor court. Yep, that view. So we're trying to create more of a motor court type approach as you come onto the leasing office entrance, so that it creates a little bit more of a hardscape area rather than just being a parking lot. We do have a lot of cars shown in this elevation, but the whole idea is that it's more of a walkable courtyard than it is just regular parking spaces. We have introduced a lot of brick into certain elements of the project where there's going to be more pedestrian use, and a lot of other just typical multifamily type products for everywhere else when it comes to siding, hardy panel, those sort of elements. The other thing we try to do is keep a lot of the massing and the color breaks and the changes to a smaller scale. We try to keep the building to have a little bit more of a base. You can kind of see it defines a base at about three stories to 2 stories, depending on which materials you're looking at and how we try to step it up the facade to kind of help bring the eye level down and keep the massing not looking as large. We did that creatively in several spots in the concept design to help integrate it with the townhomes to the left and right as well. And in this elevation, you can see on the right side, we do have, again, more amenity spaces that kind of drive at the drive under space to get into some parking in the back, but we've created kind of a drop-off pickup area in that location that has a great amenity space above it with a lot of views out. I think that's all the slides we had for elevation wise. And I'll give it back to Aspen to talk about the affordable housing piece.
Thank you. So we met last night with the Advisory Council on Affordable Housing. A little bit about what we discussed yesterday evening was our intention to comply with the 15% requirement or advice from the council to meet the comprehensive plan with the ordinance. As we mentioned, we talked about 337 units. Of that, 44 of those or 15% will be affordable units. 50% of those will reach the 80% AMI, and the other 50% will be the 65% AMI. It is important to note that all the affordable units will provide the same unit finishes, mixes, and amenities as the market rate units. And as you see in the table we've outlined below, we spread those out proportionally throughout the property and the townhouses, which we think is a good draw for affordable, especially with the towns and some of the flat sizes and the 3 bedrooms that we have to offer. So I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to this component of the project or any other design elements.
Okay.
That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Okay, bring us back to full screen. That'd be great. Okay, council member clarifying questions, and then we'll hear from the public. We do have a number of members signed up to speak. So I have Ms. Berry, followed by Mr. Parker, by Ms. Ryan, then Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Ms. Hardesty, you said that you were likely seeking an R6, and I thought it was an R8 that you would be seeking. I just wanted to be clear.
Right now, I think it would be an R6. I'm actually not sure. Does an R8 zoning district exist?
No.
Okay. So I thought I had seen. Go ahead, Judy. I'm sorry.
I would say our most dense residential zoning district is R6.
Okay, so I wrote down the wrong thing in my notes. So that's why I'm asking. Okay, and then as far as the affordable housing units, it was great to see that 15% in there, and the amenities will be comparable to the market rate. I'm curious what the difference in size will be.
The unit sizes for the affordable will be the same sizes as the market rate.
Okay,
So there'll be no variation at all.
that's it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Parker, then Ms. Ryan, Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, a few things. Let me start with the, sort of the composition of the units in terms of what is your, rough mix in terms of bedrooms and in terms of square footages of the units that you're proposing?
I'm pulling up that information right now. If you give me 1 second. I apologize for not having it handy. So right now, our unit average is looking at around 1,000 square feet, just over 1,000 square feet. And we have approximately 154 one beds, 145 two beds, and 55 three beds.
Okay. And so what's your target market? I mean, are you looking at this as a family-oriented development, young professionals? Where do you see this fitting in? We talk a lot about missing middle income rather than just missing middle. And how do you see this fitting into that construct?
Yeah, this is David. I'll take that. So we really see all of the demographics, probably, as you mentioned, Mr. Parker, from the millennials, right? So early out of school all the way to probably mid-30s, 45 demographic, as well as families. One thing we've tried to incorporate is really a sense of community of having, as Michael mentioned, 1s, 2s, and 3s at a good proportion, and as well as kind of a differentiation of the product type. Some people prefer to be very close to the amenities, younger demographic, or other tenants, potentially families, would prefer a 3-bedroom townhouse. So we think it touches on all those.
And in terms of families, I couldn't tell from the drawing, what are you planning in terms of, resources for kids, play areas, playgrounds, both interior and exterior, to make it actually something that families will want to live in?
Sure, very good question. I think we're still in further study on doing that. So we don't have any defined interior amenity spaces or our landscape architect, drawings to bring anything formalized at this time, but we are certainly planning on incorporating, as we mentioned, that demographic amenities that meets those needs. And certainly we'll be happy to come back and follow up with you as we further develop those plans and program the amenity package.
Okay, next is how many parking spaces are you actually planning? It appears, just leaving aside the parking that would be presumably taken care of by garages in the townhomes. But what do you think, how many parking spaces are you planning? And as far as I can tell, none of them are either under building or in structured parking, right? It's all parking lots. Is that correct?
That is correct. Michael can clarify, but I believe all of our townhouses are under parking.
Right, but I'm talking about the apartment building.
Yeah, they're all surface parks.
And how many of them are there?
I want to say approximately. Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, Dave. Yeah, we were approximately 450 range. We're still working on the plans and revising slightly, just based off additional civil information we've been getting, but that's approximate right now.
Okay, and then my last question is, obviously, the way the drawing shows, the main entry and egress is through that road off of Weber Dairy past the townhomes and into the, back end. But there was something mentioned about using the stub out into Lullwater and also creating that connection. So I was wondering, what conversations have you had with the folks who were developing Lullwater? Are they amenable to that? And if Lullwater doesn't get developed, would you be looking at any other means of entry and egress? Or are you going to be relying, if push comes to shove, on that single entry and egress point?
Very good question, sir. To answer that specifically, we did have a very good meeting this week with Novair, with their full development team and our development team. We discussed continuing those conversations and as well as coordinating with our civil design team as well as our architect team, so we can ensure there's some cohesiveness between the two properties from an aesthetic standpoint, but also a sense of community. We are agreeable, both them and us, to have that connectivity. We have some site challenges we need to work around, but that is our intentions and theirs as well, to connect those from a egress perspective. So we think there's a lot of opportunities to work with them and coordinate with them to make it a better community and a site location for all. Some other things we talked about, just one other last thing I would note is trying to look at, common signage, street signage going through the communities, commonality in some of the landscaping, as well as the site lighting, are just some things we're exploring right now with them.
And I'm sorry, one other thing. Have you, particularly as you, think, if you start thinking about this as one, while it's two separate entities, in some sense, creating a new neighborhood or a larger development pattern there, have you, done any explorations to see whether there would be sufficient density there to perhaps support a coffee shop or some other kinds of community retail, so to make it a more complete neighborhood rather than just, sort of a collection of apartments at this point?
Good suggestion. We have not done any further studies in regards to that. We really don't view it as obviously a retail location. So anything that went in there would have to be, a business robust enough that, or there have to be enough units in there that would, support a business full time. So that's something we would want to be sensitive to, because anything we would do, we'd want to be successful. But certainly can look at that further.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ryan, followed by Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. I know Mr. Parker asked some questions about the composition of the different units, and you said it was 1,000 feet on the apartments. What about the townhomes?
Michael, do we have that? I think you did an average across all those.
That's right. Sorry. So that's right. The average for the entire project was 1,000. So the average for the 1-bed units is about 800. The average for the 2 beds is about 1,200. And the average for the 3-bed units are about 1,500 plus or minus. So the townhomes are both 2 and 3 beds. So those range anywhere from about 1,200 to 1,500 square feet each.
Thank you. And I know you have high transmission power lines running through your site. How close do they run to the building?
They were outside of the power easement by an additional 15 feet-ish, plus or minus, at the closest location.
Okay. So if, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
As far as the actual lines lie, I'm not sure how they lie in that easement, but we're again 15 feet from the furthest point of that easement.
And do you have any idea how high the actual lines are?
Can Derek answer that better?
Yeah, hey, this is the civil engineer. That's something that we would have to acquire from Duke Energy. They keep that information pretty private typically. So we have been coordinating with Bruce Pate with their transmission department. So that's definitely something we can try to acquire from him information-wise.
Yeah, I think if this project proceeds, that will be especially important information, because and I know it's a little controversial what kind of impacts power lines like that have on residents, but it's distance related. So especially if you've got folks living up and they're at the level of the lines and they're not that far away, that might be an issue that council is concerned about. So we'll need that information brought back if you come back. Thank you.
Ms. Ryan, can I build on that? There's standards for children being close to power lines, so we'll need to know that number as well. Because if this is going to be family oriented, there are statistics where schools can't be built within a certain range of the power lines because of effects on children. All right, we had Ms. Anderson, and with there other council members with clarifying questions, Mr. Searing?
Yeah, I just, my question was the same as Mr. Parker's, but I didn't hear an answer to part of it about if low water doesn't go forward, what's your plan for having that other ingress and egress?
So certainly we would imagine that we would stub out to, obviously connect to that site if it's required by the town. I guess I'll let Derek kind of answer if we have, for the full egress and how we plan on addressing that.
Yeah, so I've been coordinating with Judy. She's on the call right now. We're trying to get a TIA scheduled. The trip count from TIA would really let us know if we needed a secondary point of access. So once we get the TIA completed, we would then know if Weaver Dairy would be sufficient with one access point, or if we would be required to have two access points for this development itself. So we're trying to coordinate it right now. We don't know the answer in terms of if we need the secondary point of access.
Sorry, I'm on mute. So you haven't figured out the second access if you need it yet?
Correct. Yeah, the traffic engineer would let us know if a second point of access would be required.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Searing, followed by Ms. Miller-Fushi.
Just a couple quick questions. So the first one is in your memo about affordable housing you provided to us. You described this as a proposed student housing project. Is that what this primary purpose is?
No, I apologize. So we are actually doing another student housing project on MLK Drive that has already went to the advisory board. So I apologize. This site is 100% conventional market rate. We don't anticipate targeting students or don't anticipate students living here.
Okay. And could you just describe a little more the buffer with the Coventry townhomes? I know the width of it, but how you anticipate that buffer looking and all that.
Derek, can you help us with that?
Yeah.
Or Jesse,
so I think right now we have a 10-foot buffer that's required next to those townhomes.
So it's just space, doesn't have anything in it?
Well, it would be a buffer up to Chapel Hill standards.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Ms. Miller-Fushi, followed by Ms. Stegman.
Great, thank you. Just a quick question. Do you have a graphic showing where the power lines will run through the property?
They are loosely shown on the site plan we had presented.
Could you pull those
Can we share that again?
Yeah, that would be great.
Jesse.
Yep, 1 second.
It's really hard to see here. I can actually mark on here. So you can see that the tower is here. There's another tower here, and the lines basically come across here, and then they cut up at an angle approximately here and continue to the northeast from that location.
Okay, thank you for that.
So anywhere we see those dash circles with the images in the middle, those are the power.
Those are the towers, yes.
The towers,
correct.
thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Miller-Free, was that it? Okay, Ms. Stegman?
Just one question. We've already heard, a fair amount from neighbors around this property. Have you met with the neighbors close by and gotten feedback yet? Or what is your plan for engaging with nearby community?
Yeah, certainly in all of our projects, we do outreach to the neighborhoods to show them our plan. Once it's developed, once we have a good idea of a concept, we get some feedback from staff and from the council. And then we'll take the next steps to hear their input as well. As we're further developing those plans before we come to final submission. Obviously, as you realize, there's a lot of steps in this process. So we certainly plan on doing that and do pride ourselves in listening in the best of our ability, addressing their needs and wishes as we go through this process.
Okay, thanks.
Any other council members? Ms. Berry, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I did have one more question, and I'm trying to remember because I did take a walk and looked along there, the entrance, the road, and is it possible to switch the road? I can't remember from the elevation. Is it possible to switch the road to the other side of where those townhomes are so that it's not running alongside the existing homes, Coventry, that's there? Do you understand what I'm saying? If we were to look at that last slide, I'm just curious if that.
I think where we
I
might
do
run
understand.
into an issue there is where the power lines and that tower is. It would be difficult to put it on the left-hand side. But there, I know that our team has been looking at some other iterations of maybe running that road more central to that portion of the site.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple of questions. Do you happen to know which way the stormwater runs off this site, which direction it heads, and any indication of how much?
There's 3 drainage areas on the site. Some flows out towards Weaver Dairy, and then there's kind of a high point central to the site that sheds water east and west. In terms of, it's a mostly wooded site right now, so there's of course stormwater runoff, but going through development, we put in stormwater devices to treat that excess runoff. We would be planning from a stormwater treatment standpoint to situate the treatment devices east, west, and south to mimic the existing drainage patterns to pick up that excess stormwater for stormwater treatment. In terms of a volume calculation, I don't have that volume calculation on hand right now, but that is something that I can provide for various storm events.
Okay, so there is some that runs towards the RCD, and then there's some that runs south and some that runs west.
Correct. Yes, there's 3 different drainage areas on the site. Yes.
Okay. When we were doing our imagining of this area up there, we wanted to have a greenway trail that helped connect neighborhoods be on the front of the property towards Weaver Dairy. We don't know that people really want to use a greenway or a trail that's next to the highway, even with a buffer. And so where you have that road is where we were envisioning connectivity for people who lived all up and down Weaver Dairy Road going over to Chapel Hill North. Did you take a look at that, or is that something that can be re-examined as you move forward?
Yeah, so I think the trail was placed where it was because of the mobility and connectivity plan, but that's definitely something that we can look at as we continue to modify the plans moving forward into CZP.
Okay. Did you look at we didn't ever adopt the plan, but we spent a great deal of time working on the plan, and it called for townhomes on the leg part, and just wanted to make sure, but we really did spend some time looking at connectivity.
Yep. And I think that Brian actually pulled that up in our conversation with him as well. And so we were talking through that with him.
Okay. All right. I know we have several interested members of the public. We've been hearing from them. I know they want to speak. A friendly reminder, we do want to hear from you. It's not the only way to communicate, but we will call you in 2 at a time. and then ask you to keep your comments within 3 minutes if possible. And we look forward to hearing from you. So Ms. Stegman, will you call them in?
Mhm. We have Gordon Whitaker followed by Mary Eldridge to start.
We have Maurice, do you have a raised hand here to share with us something?
I'm finally connected. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Gordon Whitaker. I live in Carroll Woods. I've lived here since 2009, and I've had many opportunities to observe the water that runs off of this property that's under consideration for development. I think it's important to look at the topo maps because the pictures, the sketches don't convey at all the lay of the land. Most of that, most of the eastern half of that property, most of the area where the major building and the parking lot for it are drain directly into the RCD and actually abut it. So it would be, I think, unusual to be able to develop a water retention plan to keep that water shedding directly off of the roofs of the apartment building and the parking lots out of the RCD. Already we experience considerable flooding. We have a path that connects Carroll Woods to Coventry, and several times in the last 12 years, that's been completely underwater, about 3 feet underwater, because there's a drainage that comes from the RCD down along the boundary between Carroll Woods and Coventry that most of the time has little to no water actually flowing through it. But after a heavy rain, it carries a considerable amount of water. And in fact, as I said, does flood the path that leads between Carroll Woods and Coventry. On that narrow strip of land that connects Weaver Road to the larger portion of land where the proposed townhomes sit, the land slopes in a southeast direction. That is, the watershed brings the water down toward Coventry, both from the west and from the north. There's a small, probably an old farm pond or something in there that some of that drains into. But if that's all paved and roofed, it would provide a lot of water shedding right down toward the proposed road and the Coventry townhomes on the other side of it.
Mr. Whitaker, your time's up. Can you wrap us up, please?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, so just to kind of chime in to help do some clarification on the stormwater treatment for this.
Can you wait till we're done with public comment, please, Derek? We usually let our public speak uninterrupted. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, who do we have next?
We have Mary Eldridge followed by George David Hughes.
Thank you. Welcome. You're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you, Mary. There you go.
Now.
Yes, we can hear you. Okay.
All right. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I live at 113 Essex Drive in Coventry, in one of the 14 townhomes that Carol Woods owns. So I'm a Carol Woods resident living at Coventry. And most of the attention, understandably, has been put on the larger back portion of the property because that's where most of the people will live. But I'm very concerned about the relatively narrow corridor that leads from Weaver Dairy Road to the back portion, the larger portion. I really urge you to look at the topo map, and you will see that that area is steep in some places, very steep in some places, and extremely steep in some places. And the extremely steep areas are going to drain down to Coventry, and that part of the corridor is closest to Coventry backyards. It looks to me, as proposed now, that the corridor will be about 80 to 90% impervious. And I hope the town will make very clear its requirements if this is to go forward. Just one point, the concept plan has a view from the southwest of the rectangle that's very misleading. It shows the rows of townhouses on flat land. The second issue I want to address is the access road. And the Lullwater project is still speculative. If it comes through and there is egress down Lullwater, we have to realize that probably a lot of the Lullwater residents will want to come out the Weaver Dairy Road exit if they're going toward Franklin Street or 15501. People don't like to go up to Martin Luther King, wait for the traffic light to allow them to make a U-turn if they're going to that area. And I think the access road as planned with parallel parking on both sides is really unsafe. I can see bicycles coming down, car doors opening into their path, and there's no bicycle lane provided. If there were more land there, perhaps they could provide one up by the sidewalk. And that road also has to be available for emergency vehicles. So if a fire truck comes in and has to park in one lane, that leaves a one-lane road for more than 400 cars to enter and egress. And I think the buffer between the road as planned now is very insufficient between it and Coventry. There'll be lights, there'll be exhaust, noise. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
So thank you for your attention.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, sounds like we don't have George David Hughes, so the next two are Peggy Schaefer and David Schaefer.
I see we have some other participants. You want to call the next two? We'll see where the Schaefers ended up.
They're on, they haven't moved over up. I think they just
There we go. Okay.
moved.
Peggy, are you there? You're muted.
Muted.
There
Okay.
you go. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Peggy Schaefer. I, like Mary, am also a resident of both Coventry and Carol Woods. And I have three general concerns about this project. The first is density and the scale and the traffic. And so this development of 400 residents with a 4 and 5 story building is out of sync and out of scale with the neighborhood on this stretch of Weaver Dairy Road, which is all 2 and 3 story townhomes, as you know, with mature trees and open space. So this is a mass of buildings and parking with no neighborhood assets. It looks like an effort to pack the maximum density of housing into a small space and remove all the existing forest and add pavement and buildings, except where the conservation area prohibits building. I also feel that the 2-lane road on Weaver Dairy Road is impractical and unsafe as a main access to the site. The road to the west is hypothetical, and whether or not that exists, the traffic entering and exiting on Weaver Dairy Road will back up and a new traffic light will be needed, but that will cause backups on Essex Drive. It's already hard sometimes of day to turn left out of Essex Drive. This will make it worse. So all of these increases in traffic noise and light pollution will really affect our neighborhood. My second concern is again about that narrow access, that corridor between Coventry and the Anglican Church. This is a 225-foot wide strip, which is proposed to have a 2-lane road, 2 rows of townhomes and an alley, as well as sidewalks, very dense. The townhomes to me look like barracks packed in with very little landscaping. And the buffer on the east side of this corridor is just 10 feet, which is an inadequate cushion between the road and the townhomes where lots of people live. But the buffer on the west side of this corridor is 20 feet beside the church where no one lives. And I don't understand why that is. And my last concern is also already been mentioned about the drainage and impervious surfaces. So this plan is said to be about 50% impervious surfaces, so about 10 acres, 50% of the total land, creating significant runoff and drainage. And I'm sure there's all sorts of nice plans with stormwater and retention ponds, but that water is going to run off and the land does slope from northwest to southeast, and it's going to land here in Coventry, and it's going to change the way we live and cause erosion in that stream. So, and they say they're going to have massive storage tanks, but they don't say where they're going to be. So in conclusion, to me, this is a massive apartment building and dense blocks of townhomes being added to a quiet neighborhood where they'll be out of place and diminish a quality of life. And I would urge you to modify this plan and make it compatible with the existing neighborhood or reject it entirely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have David Schaefer, and I believe David Hughes is now here.
David Schaefer is right next to me. I can just turn my computer and he can speak on the same one if you like.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Here you go, dear.
Shared resources, wonderful.
My name is Dave Schaefer. As you know, I live at Coventry, right next to the proposed double row of barrack-style townhouses. My personal preference would be to keep the trees, but I recognize that there's so much need for additional housing in Chapel Hill that sooner or later this property probably will be developed. But I ask you, please insist on a better proposal than this one. Please hold off till you receive a plan that doesn't create flooding problems, a plan that fits in with the neighborhood rather than being an eyesore, a plan that makes a meaningful contribution to affordable housing for working people employed in Chapel Hill, not for people who will hop on the I-40 and commute out to RTP. Very likely this means development will have to wait till the landowner realizes that his property has so many negatives associated with it that it isn't worth what he's asking for. With a lower price on the land, a developer could still make a reasonable profit with a less crowded design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think next we have David Hughes, who is on Elizabeth, showing up as Elizabeth Hughes, but is David Hughes, and then Marianne Ratcliffe. I don't see them moving over. Oh,
There we go. We got Mary Ann.
So maybe Marianne can go while we're working on
Mary Ann, can you speak with us? Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, y'all. Can you see me?
We can see you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate the dialogue and look forward to connecting with Aspen in the future. I'm a relatively new employee with Carol Woods, and I think I wanted to speak on behalf of the residents and our organization. We welcome next door neighbors as we have with Coventry and others. The concern I have shared with residents and our board and our staff is the jump in density that this development conveys from really R3 at Carol Woods and R4 at Coventry, and looking for some consistency in the neighborhoods around us. So the density is a concern. We certainly look forward to having new neighbors in this property and protecting the wetlands. I love that about this development. I am concerned a bit about the buffer or the lack of the buffer. A 10-foot buffer is pretty insignificant. I would say when you sit on the back deck of a Coventry resident and you look out, and you will have a two-way entry and then townhomes. It's a pretty stark contrast to the environment we are enjoying at present at Coventry. Those were my primary concerns, the lack of evergreens and
There you are.
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Great. Sorry. I would love to see more evergreens as a buffer. But again, we certainly welcome our new neighbors, but those are some of the concerns that I have: the lack of consistency with relative neighbors in the area, and want to thank the council for their review of this. And I look forward to talking directly with the developers about ways in which we can work together as neighbors. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have David Hughes, followed by Julie McClintock.
Mr. Hughes,
I understand.
you're good. Welcome.
Okay, I'm David Hughes, resident of Carol Woods for about 14 years. And you'll probably find my position a little bit more extreme. Last January, when I learned that the Taiwan owner of the property west of us has given an option to Aspen Partners to build apartments, that was listed in that original proposal was largely for students. And now I see that it's made a shift. So some of my presentation requires some explanation, but my presentation is limited to 3 minutes, but all council members have my 9-page report. So everything I'm going to list here for them not developing this land is supported by documentation and footnotes in that 9 pages. And it answers some of the questions that the council asked regarding the effect of electromagnetic radiation from power lines on children and the sound reduction along the road going in near Coventry. I have answered all that. And you have not raised some questions about the sound regarding the apartments themselves. Frankly, it would be hard to find a piece of land that is ill-suited for the kind of housing that you're proposing, and that's ill-suited because of the shape of the land, the turns in the highway, and the fact that the apartments have nothing with regard to sound abatement. but let me just list the items that I have here. The proposal violates federal and state laws and regulations regarding highway noise. After reviewing 700 studies of highways and air pollution, experts concluded that teenage and younger children who live within 300 meters of the highway have a higher probability of permanent heart and lung diseases. The electro and magnetic radiation from high power lines adjacent to the high-rise apartments can disrupt cable TV and smartphones. And if you look at my 9 pages, you see exhibit number 3 has the power lines tower shifted right up next to the high rise, not where the developer said it is. It violates local requirements for space to maneuver emergency vehicles.
Oh, did we lose him? Okay. We'll see if he comes back. Ms. McClintock, are you next?
Followed by Robert Beasley.
Okay, welcome.
Hi there. Good evening, Mayor Pam and council members. Julie McClintock, and I participated along with a lot of other folks when the council was struggling with trying to figure out a master plan for this area because they wanted to be coordinated, which is do some advanced planning, which is a laudable objective. But my conclusion at the end of quite a long period of time and good effort by the council is that this land, this property has sufficient problems with it that it would be really difficult to make a master plan for it. That was my conclusion. And just to list off some of the things we've heard tonight, I have a little posted here. I-40, traffic noise has been mentioned, which can actually harm hearing. In particulate matter, I spent my career at EPA in air quality, and actually living next to highways, people get ill. Living next to highways, it harms the heart and it harms the lungs. That we've mentioned the high tension wires. There's the RCD and wetlands and streams, which has its own kind of constraints. There's the stormwater challenges, which would be keeping that water on this piece of property, even if you have some storage tanks, will not be possible in a large storm. And then a sheer amount of pavement. And finally, one that hasn't been mentioned yet tonight, and that is the sewer line. I think there's a trunk line sewer there, which it would be interesting to know exactly where that is and whether that would need to be moved. So the bottom line is, I think the question you have to answer tonight is it possible to have a development on this land that has so many constraints to it? And I think the very final point I would like to make is that really, when we go for affordable housing, we don't want to put it on the land that is right next to a highway that exposes those residents to a high degree of particulate matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have Robert Beasley, and I'm not clear. Elizabeth Hughes has her hand raised, but I'm not sure if that was to bring attention to, and she took it down. I think that was for
David Hughes. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then we have a new hand, Albert Howlett.
Okay.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Great, thank you. I just had a question or point of confusion from the presentation on the last slide where it was talking about the affordable housing. And one of the things that seems appealing, maybe one of the few things, is that it's targeting 15%. But I noticed a little asterisk with the note that it was pinning the AMI to Raleigh. And this is Chapel Hill, and just Googling the AMI between Raleigh and Chapel Hill, they're not the same. And I'm just wondering if you're using the Raleigh numbers, if we applied the Chapel Hill numbers, are we still hitting 15%? How does that shift? Are we getting less affordable housing? Is it being misrepresented? So I'd be curious to hear the comments and clarity on that and why Raleigh was chosen instead of Chapel Hill. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. The 15% is number of units, just so you know, but I don't have an answer for the AMI. We can ask the developer to.
It's 15%, but based on
units.
Raleigh's AMI. If you
That's
change
Raleigh
that
metropolitan
number, is it
area.
still 15%?
It's Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill metropolitan area.
Yeah.
That's not what it said, but thank you.
I don't.
That's what it is.
I don't.
Let's
think that-
let's not all chime in, please. Thank you. Okay, we have another member of the public.
Mr. Howlett, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Welcome.
My name is Albert Howlett, and I live at 105 Essex Drive. I am part of Carol Woods. I'm speaking on my own behalf. And I know that earlier this area is planned to be developed, the whole area up here. But I think that each day we realize that we are now in a climate crisis. And the Earth, including Chapel Hill, is warming at a rate that could lead to the end of life on Earth as we know it. I am pleased that Chapel Hill has a climate action plan with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to slow the warming. It will take actions on several fronts to achieve this goal. As per your plan, one is urban forest, the tree canopy. Trees take carbon out of the air. They turn it into oxygen through photosynthesis and store carbon in their trunks and roots. The tree canopy also provides shade that mitigates heat island effects. The developer proposes to chop down this forest, except for the wetlands to the east. We can't have urban forests everywhere, but this awkward piece of forest land with steep slopes, power lines on 3 sides, nobody's mentioned the north-south power line that cuts through this property, an interstate highway on the 4th side is no place for development. This forest is being marketed as the last developable piece of land in North Chapel Hill. This land should not be developed. It should not be rezoned. It should remain a forest. Impervious surface. Chapel Hill expresses great concern about impervious surfaces, especially on steep slopes. This project would change 50% of the land to impervious surface. However, the other 50% is wetlands and under the power lines. Therefore, I calculate that the development is turning almost all of the forest into impervious surface. And I want to mention that car dooring that Mary mentioned. Cars dooring bicycles can have grave consequences, as we know. At the proposed, and it's a 4-lane road. There's 2 parking lanes on each side. Those are full-size lanes, plus the 2 travel lanes. This 4-lane road in the development is designed for parallel parking on both sides. As the developer says, for renters, yeah, there's a little garage, and visitors. And this is because there's not enough room off-road for parking at each townhouse, enough. So bicycles hurrying to work and home again along this road, and cars swinging doors, and you know the results, what can happen. So I want to thank you very much. And I also planning to send you some pictures of the forest that's there and how steep the hillsides are, which do not come through in the slides of the developer.
Thank you, Mr. Howlett. Thank you. Okay, that includes our raised hands for public comments. So I bring it back to council for comments. I always
Can I interrupt real quick? I saw in the text that George, we lost him, Hughes, and he said his computer failed and he was trying to get back.
Okay.
Tried to let him in, but I haven't.
I see that you have him in now. Mr. Hughes, are you there? Mr. Hughes?
Unmute, there we are.
Okay. You have about a minute left if you want to wrap up, please.
If I'm speaking now and 1 minute left, let me just say, I think that this proposal is not given in good faith. It originally started out as student housing. And on February 23rd, the town council rejected a 6-story building on Martin Luther King because the study done between it and the university deemed that additional student housing was not necessary. Suddenly, this proposal has switched from student housing, which was the original plan, to suddenly it's townhouses for families, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much uncertainty and lack of being able to answer specific questions. I frankly think this is not a proposal given in good faith. I've examined Aspen Partners student housing and other campuses, and I'm sorry, but they do not have a good reputation. I think it should be rejected.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Appreciate it. Sorry about your computer problems. All right, I'll bring it back to council. I saw Ms. Ryan, then Ms. Anderson. Feedback to the developer, then Mr. Parker.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for your presentations. I'm going to stay pretty high level here. I think for concept plans, that's most helpful in making sure that the applicant hears here's kind of the central message we're trying to get across. So for me, this development is not what I'm looking for. I think the monolithic apartment building surrounded by a sea of surface parking is something that is not very exciting. It's something that we're trying to move away from. I would be much happier to look at something if there were more smaller townhomes or stacked units that would work better with the topography and work better with the site. I don't feel like this application does that. One of the residents who commented said there are no neighborhood assets. I find that really troubling here. I think that we've had some other developers come in and do really creative things. What we're trying to do is build community. It doesn't necessarily have to be expensive, but there have to be places where the people who live in that place can gather and become a neighborhood. There also has to be ways for them to move from that neighborhood and connect into the larger Chapel Hill and be part of our bigger community. And I'm just not seeing that with this concept. I have a whole lot of concern about putting a very tall building next to power transmission lines. Again, the science is a little bit equivocal, but there are effects and the effects change with distance. So it's one thing to have somebody even on the ground under a power line, but when you have somebody's window up high next to a power line, you're getting all that much more exposure. So I've got concerns about that. So for me, this proposal is not hitting the mark. And I would urge you, if you're considering to develop here, to come back with another concept. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson and Mr. Parker, and then Ms. Stegman.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I feel this site is completely appropriate for residential. I just think it's way too packed. It doesn't feel like a neighborhood. It just feels like warehousing for humans. I guess without a community component. I think the townhomes, I think, are a good idea. I just think they're very close to the existing ones, to the point where the road, I think, is uncomfortable. But I think some sort of stacked townhomes would be great here. I do think that also the unit sizes are pretty large. It just feels like a massive, huge donut with kind of a interior recreation space. So I think the overall idea of residential makes sense. I just think that this concept just isn't what we need.
Mr. Parker, then Ms. Stegman, then Mr. Searing.
Yeah, I don't have major disagreements with what I've heard. In fact, I have very few disagreements with what I've heard so far. I mean, I've read the Urban Designers report, I've read the CDC report, and I think I would urge the developers to take both of them very seriously. I am less troubled by an apartment building there, although particularly there was one of your renderings where the power tower was actually grayed out, but you could still make it out, and seeing basically what is a very tall power line right smack dab in the middle of this development didn't look all that appealing. I think the two major concerns I want to highlight are, one, a sea of parking. 450 surface parking spaces is not what we're looking for. And while I'm certainly no lover of Texas Donut, some level of structured parking or under building parking or tabletop parking or whatever works needs to be there if you're going to build at that level of density. But certainly we're not looking for 450 surface. I mean, this looks much more like an office park than it does a residential community. Number one. And then getting back to that, there seems to be very little thought being given to creating a true community here. I mean, the townhomes are completely very separate from the apartments. They don't, really have easy access to any of the neighborhood amenities. Again, it's, two seemingly disparate developments sort of stuck together, joined only by a very large electrical tower. So I would really urge you to rethink this and think about how can we make this into, if you're going to go down this road, how do we create a true neighborhood here? One of the things that is increasingly being talked about in transportation venues is complete streets, but we also need complete neighborhoods, and this is nothing like that. And so I think this really needs a lot of work. Thanks.
Okay. I think we had Ms. Stegman followed by Ms. Steer. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure. I got confused. Ms. Stegman go, then Mr. Searing, and then I've got Ms. Berry and Ms. Miller-Ruschi.
Great. I'll be brief. I agree with everything that has been said. I also am. I think residential it would be appropriate here, but it has to fit all the criteria that my colleagues have shared. I will add, I think a reduction in impervious surface, bikeable, walkable, connected, a sense of community, a sense of place. None of those things are really in there right now. The scale is too big. The buffers are too small. It just doesn't resonate with what we're trying to create in Chapel Hill. And it's car centric. I'm not afraid of density, but it has to make the right density for the right space, and that's just, it doesn't fit. It does feel like just the intensity for this particular plot is just not. It doesn't fit. It's not appropriate. And I think that's it. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Searing, followed by Ms. Berry and Ms. Miller-Ruschi, and then Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, I agree with much of the comments that have been said already, especially the ones about the health effects concerns on children on the unique properties of the site. But as part of this, I was looking at the different communities that are around here, Weatherstone, Kensington Trace, and we've got Coventry, Carroll Woods, and there's actually several groups of duplexes that are farther down Weaver Dairy. And I actually know several people who live in some of these communities. And one thing that several of my fellow members have mentioned is our desire to create a sense of community. And, when I talk to the people I know in these communities, several of them do have that sense of community, and they're very, active associations of their, homeowners or otherwise, and are working together, have, things that they are doing together. And they express the very concerns that we're expressing, the apartment building, the really high density, the hundreds of cars in and out, the effects on traffic. And so, I think looking at the communities that are there already, that have the kinds of variations in affordability and type, but doing more of that is kind of where I'm looking. And then the other thing I think is that, and we've heard about this several times tonight, but this particular piece of property, if it's not connected to the other one, everything has to go in and out this little strip. And that just seems to be not well thought out. I mean, I think 10 feet of a buffer is just doesn't make much sense at all. And will really have an impact on neighbors. So those are my two comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Berry, then Ms. Miller-Fouché, then Mr. Nguyen.
Thank you. I'm looking at the photos that I took from last week's walk, and though the trees that currently exist in that area that would be the buffer are not very big, the removal of existing trees means that it would be very tough for those neighbors in Coventry to observe moving forward. And I think it was Mary Ann Ratcliffe who said the contrast would be so stark to go to that. Another thing that I would like to mention is we had a speaker mention the AMI, and I would like to encourage the developers to take a look. Having worked in affordable housing, I'm pretty sure that the AMI does differ between Raleigh and Chapel Hill. I believe there is a difference. So please make sure that you are using the current one, the proper one. And I am concerned about the danger of the power lines and how they what they present to future residents. The mobility, I'm trying to look at your thing here, how easy it is to move in and out of this development, this proposed development. And I don't need to repeat too much else of what folks have already said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Miller-Fouché, followed by Mr. Nguyen.
Great, I'm going to be brief. I just wanted to agree with a lot of the comments that I had. Seeing this concept plan, it really does look like an industrial park to me. I agree with Councilmember Parker about the townhomes and the apartments just seeming like two separate communities. And what we are really looking for are complete neighborhoods. And so we want that connectivity within the community, but also connected to the greater community. So really center families, really think about the amenities that need to be there for families, the things that are going to be needed, really integrating green space opportunities to be connected outside. I really don't get that. And it is a lot of parking. I think this is a great site for residential. We need the density to meet our needs, our housing needs, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So really going forward, think about complete neighborhoods and connections. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I agree with everything that's been said. The only piece I'd add is I do like the focus on families and also the young professionals. I think, from our housing study, that was another kind of core demographic group that we're missing in town. And even us young professionals also like community gathering spaces and amenities, and also retail near where we live. So more commercial space as a part of the project would definitely be something I would advocate for. I know in the master planning process we tried to incorporate a lot of commercial space on this plot and the neighboring plot as well, and would hate to see that be left out. So just want to add a plug for that.
All right, thank you. I'll add my own comments and then I can wrap up here. I agree with a lot of the things that have already been said. I do think you missed an opportunity to tuck parking under this building because of the topography. You have the opportunity not to have so much impervious surface there. It just looked like a sea of parking around a building, which will only make the noise and the heat index worse. I really think you also missed an opportunity at putting the greenway in front and then getting rid of that one access road there, that you could pull the residential up to that, and the greenway becomes a amenity with sitting spaces and gathering spaces for people wanting to connect between neighborhoods and over to Chapel Hill North. You've seen this done well in other cities where they have these neighborhoods that connect to the retail area that people love to use. And then there spring up coffee shops and places like that along the trail itself. I agree. I don't feel like this feels like a connected. You don't feel like you're trying to connect to the other neighborhoods or within your own neighborhood. So too much impervious surface. I'm not afraid of density for density's sake, but I don't feel like you got this one what we need to have. And I'm very worried about the power lines. I think the stormwater is an issue that bears looking at again. I think you need to really take a look at the site during a heavy rain and see what's there. We are trying to move our ordinance to be the 100-year flood. We haven't gotten quite there yet, but we're trying to really emphasize making sure that stormwater doesn't flood out of new construction, doesn't flood, and impervious surface doesn't flood out existing neighborhoods as well. So I think you're hearing the same theme from council members in general, that we'd rather you try something a bit different here, that we had some concerns about building community, about, you've heard some different noises, sentiment about next to I-40. I will say the parcels left in Chapel Hill to develop are getting harder and have more challenges than what was here before. So while we understand that, we think this could be done better. So those are our comments. Are we ready to transmit them?
So moved.
We transmit comments.
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Nguyen to transmit comments. Roll call vote. Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Berry. Oh, sorry, Ms. Anderson. Everybody jumped around all of a sudden. I'm like, whoa, sorry. Okay, Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fushi.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. That's all we had on our agenda for this evening. We will see council next week at 4 p.m. for our retreat. Please be a little early if you could, because it takes a while to park and get into the site. So we'd like to get started right on time.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you very
see you
much.
then.
Appreciate everyone.
Good night.
Good night all.
Night,
Good
everyone.
night, everyone.